And politics is full of stupidity, and that's up there with the best. But, you know, I didn't know that was the reason. I just sensed there's something wrong. And ordinary people everywhere can sense at the moment that building a city around cars doesn't work anymore. So we've got to that point where you can get mass support for these issues. If you dramatise them enough, you can win these issues. And that's a big change.
Question?
Yeah.
Well, we have the mic over there.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, there.
Can you talk a little bit about the trends related to parking capacity in downtown areas where you have, whether it's the projections for autonomous vehicles or an increase in public transit? What are the roles do the parking structures and the increase in parking capacity play over time?
Yeah, parking is a good one. It's a bit of a symbol for this city of the future. Jan Gehl's key idea is you can replace every parking place with 3 people sitting or walking. That's kind of a similar space need. And he said if you get 3 people sitting in a city or walking through a city, they are adding significantly more value than that car that's just sitting there occupying space. So he was able to convince people in Copenhagen to start phasing out parking very slowly. So they lost 3% of parking per year for 30 years. And nobody noticed, because they took the space they'd created and turned it into walkable, attractive space. Now you go to Copenhagen today, there's still space for cars, but not much. It's mainly a space for walking and bicycling. It's a city that has become wealthier and wealthier. It's one of the wealthiest in the world. It keeps getting up in the top 6 of the world's most livable cities, and yet they've been getting less parking every year. Now he's been around the world preaching that message to every city. There's about 40 cities he's worked in now, and every one of them he shows them how to do that, and when they do it, it works. The city does better economically. It is so much more attractive for young people to stay and work in, and capital is attracted to the area. So why wouldn't you do it? It seemed to be politically difficult, but now if you do it carefully and quietly, you actually don't need anything like the parking spaces we first thought, and which the manuals still say you need. This is the problem with statutory planning regulations. How many parking spots you need that's required. So transit-oriented developments, these TODs that John owns, they have to still fit the planning rules, and in many places the planning rules haven't changed to accommodate the fact you do not need as much parking. So you need to phase it out and have only 1 space per apartment or less. And those places then become significantly cheaper and much more affordable, because every parking space is about $40,000 you have to add to the cost of a house. So it saves a lot of money, and it saves greenhouse gases, it does everything right. You can put a levy on parking spaces in those central areas and put that money back into public transport. So we did that in Perth, and this is a city that's very car oriented, and they did it and accepted it because there was a free bus service in the central area that replaced many people's need for cars. They're just very easy to get around in that central area. It comes entirely out of the parking levy. So you can do things like that, but generally parking is something that you need to make part of the package to transform it. Autonomous vehicles, I just think it's a solution that's looking for the problem to solve, and they're not solving the problem that we know, which is having too many cars. It's actually not a question of having just less parking where you've got cars roaming around the streets. You'd need more and more traffic capacity for it, and that's not what you need. You need less cars in those central areas. But autonomous vehicles can roam around the suburbs, enabling people to get very quickly and easily from their home to the train station, and then at the other end as well. I can see that, but I don't see any other role for it.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, my question has to do with the last mile and the first mile. You know, particularly in Florida with the heat, we can walk distances, but days like today with humidity and the heat, it makes it very difficult to get people to accept traveling on rail unless it drops them off at their door.
Yeah, it's really worth trying it out though. I think you'll find that climate isn't a major factor in most of the cities we've studied. We've tried to see if climate was, but it doesn't correlate really with anything. There are other factors. So there would be many people who would make that link, as long as you can provide a fast option that enables you, and air conditioning, to have that link, which is so much preferable to having to drive and getting stuck in the traffic. People are over that. So, and we do need to walk, even in a hot climate. So I've lived and worked in Singapore a lot. It's right on the equator. What they've done is put in a lot of what we call biophilic urbanism. There's a lot of trees covering the streets. There's a lot of, every building has green walls and green roofs. It's cooling the city, and the shading is so fantastic. Now you've got real opportunities for biophilic urbanism. It's very hard to stop things growing here. And if you build that in to the way in which you do the development in the next 20, 30 years, make that part of the requirements, really. They have a requirement in Singapore. You have to replace the floor plate of the building 2 to 3 times with greenery, either in green walls, green roofs, green balconies. And some of them do 5 times. It's a sort of competition. And go to Singapore. It's a fantastically green city now. They're calling it not a garden city, but a city in a garden. And it really is. It is also the wealthiest city in the world now.
Professor, we're all excited about the Bright Line connecting Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach. But we don't have the transit infrastructure as, say, Washington, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. So based on your experience, what kind of chances do you think we really have for it to be successful?
Oh, I think it's a very high chance of success because the bones of it are looking good. If you've got that structure down the corridor, it'll be very competitive with the freeways. What you need then is the cross linkages, and that's what I've been talking up here. And I think you'll find that if you ask the private sector to do them, and to do them out of land development opportunities, you'll find there is a huge opportunity there. The money can be found that way. And don't wait for the federal government to give you all the money or the state government. Just get out there and ask. You've got a development community that have all kinds of ideas about where development could happen. And they need to form partnerships with the people who build the light rail and own and operate it, and with the various levels of government who can begin to process that into a plan. and I think you'll find that you can do it very quickly. I reckon that you'll see in 10 to 20 years a totally transformed corridor along here.
Hello. I have a question regarding implementation and your thought. I lived in South Florida my whole life, and one of the things I realized is that everything is, how do you say it, we're all separated, and we all have one problem, such as traffic, and we all have good transit ideas, but one of the major problems is that we have too many agencies for one area or too many planning organizations. Do you think if South Florida in general would consolidate all of the transit agencies or create one transit network that goes from Miami to Palm Beach, or that work with Brightline, do you think that it would actually improve the chances of actually implementing transit-oriented development, as well as changing the culture in South Florida for car-oriented type development?
In a word, no. I used to think that. I just don't believe in Joseph Stalin anymore. I just think that the whole process of getting a top-down government solution is going to work anymore. They don't have the money anyway, but even if they did, they don't have the right way to do it because they're not entrepreneurs. Now, you could get a Lee Kuan Yew instead of a Joseph Stalin, because it's very top-down in Singapore, it's what they've done. Actually, when you're there, you see how much bottom-up there is. It's quite a lot of it. But the processes I'm talking about are about people talking to each other from the private sector, predominantly to start with, getting sure that they're in there, and having each of the levels, from the very local right through to the federal, in that discussion. Now, you can find all kinds of ways to do that, but there's no excuse to not do it because you're waiting for this massive bureaucracy to be formed. I just don't think we've got time for it, or is it any better? In reality, people need to sit around the table and start talking and enabling this whole process to unfold. I found that a very creative day today, talking with the TOD working group. There are various levels of government and private sector people, and they're very keen to find solutions. There was a little bit of reticence to start with. They didn't like the fact that they were losing a bit of power in this process. It is democratising it, actually, if you ask the private sector to help build it. There's a lot of very good ideas out there, and the public will support them as well. It's not, I don't think it's going to guarantee that it all happens, but I don't see how else you can do it unless people start talking together, and you don't need to wait for Joseph.
When you were talking about cities that have a lot of green trees, you used a word that I'm unfamiliar with. It sounded like it was 7 syllables. Biophilic
urbanism. It's a term invented by E.O. Wilson, the famous Nobel Prize-winning biologist, who said we need nature in our daily lives. We are co-evolve in nature. It's not something we can do without. You look around, where's nature? We've built it out of our systems. He says it needs to be built back in. So Tim Beatley has written a book called Biophilic Cities. He's the professor of environmental planning at University of Virginia and a co-author with me on a number of books. He gives a wonderful talk about biophilic urbanism. You should invite him down. He's set up a biophilic cities network, so cities across America and across the world have joined in it. Singapore's one of them, Wellington's one, Perth's one. They commit to the principles of biophilic urban development, and they have various goals, and then people meet to share ideas about how best to do it. It's a fabulous network and a beautiful website. So don't forget Biophilic Urbanism, it's a beauty.
Professor Newman, in South Florida, many cities and regional agencies are still using level of service standards. For the audience, I mean, that's meaning car trips or added capacity, or projected capacity increases, or need for capacity increases drives many development decisions. Are there best cases, or best practices in the United States that you would point a region like South Florida to as a model to follow? Because that's been a very big hurdle to clear, is how do we move away from level of service and start looking more at level of quality or multimodal systems?
Yeah, there's many cities that are recognising the problem of level of service. In fact, you need to have a level of service for walking, a level of service for biking, a level of service for transit, and a level of service for cars. And you need to work out which priorities you give to which in each part of the city. The walking city in the central areas, you prioritise walking and biking. In the transit city part, the corridors where the transit is going, you prioritise that. And in the areas around it, then you can let your traffic engineers talk about levels of service out there for cars. But don't give up on the fact that in many of those areas, they're looking for more transit and they're wanting more walkable centres. They'd like to have a coffee shop in their area. Well, that only comes usually with walking cities. So if you want that, you need to prioritise those different levels of service for the different modes. And to say there's one city that's got it worked out, I don't think so. But John could probably tell us. There's certainly a lot more of it now. In Denver, for example, it was a totally car-based city. And it's gone down this journey. It's had 20 years of fast tracks getting developed. And I went there this past week, and the city centre is transformed. It was like a bombed out area that had just that little bus running up and down the mall, and there was masses of open space around it from buildings that had been knocked down, and parking everywhere. And it was dead, really. It's now a thriving central city area, and they've got new rail lines going in and TODs being planned around each of them. So you can recover and win. Portland, of course, is the one that started that process, and certainly the central area is very good. But there's whole areas of Portland that are still very car dominated. So it's got a way to go, like most cities. But you go to Europe and ask about the levels of service manual, and they'll tell you, oh, we threw that away 20 years ago. Haven't used that for a long time. So the old manuals of modernism got to be thrown out. Start again. And, well, today we were hearing from Chris Sinclair about developing some TOD guidelines through the NPO that would enable you to have different sets of guidelines that the engineers... See, when they've got their numbers and their so on, they're fine. But you just need to say, no, don't do it there. This is what you need to do here. Yeah.
Professor, you talked about the current rail line, commuter rail line that we have. We have a 6 million population. Commuter rail line's been in place for 17 years. It carries 15,000 people a day. We're proposing a second one with about a mile apart from the first. Can you give us some sense of, cities that you're aware of around the world where they have parallel rail lines like that?
Yeah, most of them. A mile apart, if you've got a long corridor, a quite dense corridor, which you've got between the bush, I'd call it, and the water, you need to have two different kinds of transit system. One that is very fast and one that is more stopping more frequently. And that's what you're going to get. So they're not actually competing. They're different kinds of system that will be provided. And I think you'll find that it'll be very popular, the new high-speed one.
Actually, both of them are going to be stopping regularly. Yeah.
No, the high-speed one.
Brightline is running on the same track as a proposed coastal link, which would operate similar to the existing commuter rail, with stops in every one of the downtowns in the
Every one of four?
No,
No, it's got four stops.
No, I'm saying, Brightline is on the same track, but the state and the region are looking at putting a new commuter rail that would function similar to our existing commuter rail, with stops at every major downtown in the county. So it's, I don't know if a dozen stops or 15 stops or something like that, similar to what our commuter rail has as well. So in other words, you're going to run three different concepts, two commuter lines and the bright line on the two railroad tracks.
Well, it wouldn't be high speed then. I've only seen the numbers in terms of the speed that is going, and you're not going to get those kind of speeds if it's doing so many stops. So maybe it stops, the first one goes and stops at 4 different places, and then the next one stops at 4 other places, in which case you're still getting stops, but you're getting the speed. I mean, that's what many places do. So, yeah, they'll have to work that out. They won't get the competitive advantage they're looking for, which would help bring the development and help bring the people, unless it's significantly faster than the traffic.
All right, well, thank you. Was there another question?
There was one there, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, we heard a lot about, we're offering these things for millennials, but have you seen any cities that have been successful here in West Palm and Palm Beach County? We have also a lot of affluent older adults, and we have a lot of the cities to the north, we have a lot of older adults that will be retiring in the next 10 years and looking where they're going to purchase their next house that then they won't need to drive anymore. Is there differences in marketing or different ways that we should promote it so that way we encourage millennials as well as our older adults to our region?
Yeah, I'm sure there is branding methods, but what I was saying is that the shifts that have occurred quite quickly have been driven by the millennials. They have made choices to become more urban, less suburban, less car-based, and wanting to be near work, having those face-to-face interactions. There's a very strong increase in walking and cycling in particular amongst that group, and it's worldwide. That doesn't mean it's the only market though, by any means, and certainly there are many people who put their money into moving to a place where it is possible to live without a car as you grow older. And that's a very sensible decision to make. And certainly you can do that now. In the future of this area, you will need to have the options available for all age groups to be living, including families who want a lifestyle that's less car-based, less soccer mum chauffeuring, less dependent on having 2 or 3 cars in the family. All of that needs to be available and can be. In the way I can picture this area now, the potential is significantly there to make the most of the opportunities that are coming. As you get the new rail system and as you start to build in the connections and the land development opportunities that will be linked into that system. So I would love to come back and have a look at it at some point, because I think it's going to be very exciting, and I certainly would like to document it and tell the world about how Florida transformed itself into a transit-oriented city. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Just a couple of final announcements. First of all, thank you so much to Peter and to Raphael, the DDD, and the Palm Beach Planning Congress for helping to make this event possible. Our school, the School of Urban Regional Planning at FAU, we hope to have more events like this in the future. We had you all RSVP, or hopefully most of you RSVP'd, so we have your email addresses, so we'll keep you updated when we have other exciting events and speakers. Also, courtesy of Liberty Bookstore, there are books for sale. Peter's book is for sale in the lobby. I'm sure Peter would be happy to chat with you and sign it out in the lobby afterwards. So thank you very much.